Hello, welcome to Unfiltered. Did you catch the Democrats' latest scam? They face planted brutally on this defunding the police garbage. So now they're trying to flip the script and say the Republicans are trying to defund the police. I mean, there's levels of insanity. If there's a 1 through 10 scale, this is a 10. And they're doing it all while doing absolutely nothing to stop the nationwide crime wave in the liberal cities that they're causing. Crime up. What are they doing? Trying to blame it on Republicans. This is insane. This is senior advisor to Joe Biden, Cedric Richmond, trying this stunt. Check this out.
And let's talk about who defunded the police. When we were in Congress last year trying to pass a rescue plan, I'm sorry, not the rescue plan, but an emergency relief plan for cities that were cash strapped and laying off police and firefighters, it was the Republicans who objected to it. They defunded the police. We funded crime intervention and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, okay, listen, that's all crap. He just made all that up. That's all nonsense. We know what needs to be done to clean up this nationwide crime wave. We know it. I know it. I was a police officer under Rudy Giuliani when he was the mayor of New York City, and there were very specific things that happened that cleaned that city up from the mess it was to the Mecca it became. I'll get to more of that later. And by the way, to the Democrats out there listening, I know you're out there. I get your nasty grams during the week about the show. Are you really sure you want to stick by this story that Republicans want to defund the police? Because that would require some actual evidence. Because I have a whole boatload of evidence that your people, Democrats, your elected officials wanted to defund the police. Check it out.
Yes, I support the defund movement because this is about the investment in our communities, which have historically been divested.
Not only do we need to defund, but we need to dismantle and start anew.
Why use the word defund? Why use the word defund? And it's like, this is the word that's coming from the streets.
Defund the police does not mean abolish the police. It means a dramatic reduction in the number of police in our poor communities.
I am for defunding the police. Look, the reality is we can't rely upon the police to provide public safety.
It's a moment to reimagine policing, to take things off the shoulders.
In many cities in America, over 1/3 of their city budget goes to police. So we have to have this conversation. What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? We're having this conversation. You see, and the conversation is about evidence. And I have evidence that you guys are full of crap. See, there you are on tape talking about defunding the police. So Jen Psaki, chief propagandist at the White House, was asked by our own Peter Doocy, hey, can you name a single Republican on tape or anywhere who supports defunding the police? Here was her answer.
I think most people would argue that actions are more important than words, wouldn't you say? Again, I think actions speak louder than words. If you oppose funding for the COPS program, something that was dramatically cut by the prior administration and many Republicans supported, and then you vote against a bill that has funding for the COPS program, we can let other people evaluate what that means. It doesn't require them to speak to it or to shout it out. Their actions speak for themselves.
Yeah, actions do speak louder than words, and the actions of Democrat-led cities have spoken a lot louder than their words. We already heard their words. They've called for defunding the police. Matter of fact, here's an article by the left-leaning publication, The Guardian, talking about cities that defunded the police. They're calling it transferring money to the community. You know, they love the euphemisms game and all. Here's a pop quiz for everyone at home. I'm going to name a few cities. We're not going to go through all of them in the interest of time. I'll just name 5. They all have one thing in common, defunding the police. And who are they run by? Austin, Los Angeles, New York City, Oakland, Portland. Anyone in the control room want to help here? I think those are run by Democrats. I'm pretty sure I'm right. Do the fact checkers want to check on that for me? Because I'm pretty sure I'm correct. Listen, let's talk about first what doesn't work. And what doesn't work is what the Democrats are doing now, which is BSing you. They do want to defund the police, and their talk about defunding the police has led to this. Homicides exploding, crime through the roof, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Portland, New York City up 22%. Those are real people with real lives and real consequences for your stupidity. Listen, what works? I said I mentioned it before. I lived through it. You know what does work? Broken windows policing. You know what broken windows policing was? You lock up the guys who commit the little crimes. You jump the turnstile, you lock the guy up for jumping the turnstile in the train station. Why? because the same guy who jumps the turnstile on the train station is the guy who goes and mugs someone on the train. I can't tell you what a revolution in policing that was when I was there. It cleaned up New York City almost overnight. While we're at it, there was a crowd control policy under Rudy Giuliani, too. You know what that was? You know why there were very few, if any, civil disturbances under Rudy Giuliani? Because here was the policy. First guy who throws a rock at a brewing riot, you know what happens to him? He goes to jail. That's what happens. Second guy who throws a bottle, he goes to jail, too. What do you think happens to the third guy? The answer is nothing, because there isn't a third guy. And there's no riot, because the first two are in jail. Folks, these are real people, real lives living in these cities run by liberals that are descending into absolute madness. You know, we just randomly pulled an article about a person by the name of Crystal Crockett, gunned down by her boyfriend 3 months after giving birth. Who is Crystal Crockett? Is anyone even asking? Folks, every single life out there matters. This isn't a matter of partisan politics. This is a matter of real people with real lives being gunned down, mugged, attacked, burglarized in their own cities in live time. These are people with families. This is not a statistic. And what about the crime against police officers, too? Fraternal Order Police and Order of Police nationally says 150 officers shot, 28 officers killed by gunfire, 51 officers shot in 40 ambush attacks. You know, I did a Fox and Friends appearance once, and I said to Ainsley, when she asked me a question about what it was like to be a police officer, I said, you know, one of the worst parts is you get a text 3 or 4 times a year about a friend or a friend of a friend in law enforcement who was attacked, assaulted, God forbid, shot. Imagine if that was your job. Imagine if you were an architect, an engineer, a pilot, and 3 or 4 times a year you got a text from a friend saying, hey, you know your buddy Joe? Yeah, he got shot last night working. How do you think that would feel? You know, I gave a speech once, too, and there was a spouse of a police officer. She gave a powerful intro. And she said, you know, the most powerful sound in my life right now that really changes me the most is the sound of Velcro at night. Every cop in the room knew what that meant. You know, your body armor when you're a police officer is really strong Velcro, and it's really loud when you take it off. And that spouse knew when that Velcro came off and that body armor came off, that her husband was home safe at night. The police are the best of us. They deserve better than this. And so do the citizens of these liberal cities descending into absolute madness. Here to discuss this growing chaos is Donald Trump Jr. Don, welcome to the show.
How are you, Dan?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on. Don, no one knows New York City better than you. I mean, you've grown up there. You know, it's part of your heart. I grew up there, too. And it's sad to see what happens. Have you seen this on the ground over there from the Giuliani era where Times Square became a tourist mecca descending into chaos now?
Well, 100%, Dan. I mean, obviously, it's become a disaster. I know officers who are not allowed to prosecute crimes. They're not allowed to prosecute criminals. So the crime statistics are going up, but so much is actually hidden because so many police officers aren't actually even allowed to do their jobs. If you talk to some of the officers, no, you know, if that guy's doing something, it could be committing a crime, but we're not allowed to talk about it because that's how these district attorneys, that's how these guys say the crime's going down because they're not actually prosecuting people for doing crimes that were crimes like 7 minutes ago until the directive was given. It's absolutely sick. Obviously, we have a lot of people that come into work, they commute, they go through Penn Station, and these guys, it's a disaster. What's happened in the last few years in New York is a disgrace. We see this day in and day out. Hey, we deal with it ourselves at the Trump Organization. With the, you know, see the news from the district attorney's office. You know, we're very worried and continuing their witch hunt to try to hurt their political enemies like Donald Trump. They're not focusing on crime. They're letting the rioters and the looters of New York City go scot-free. But if you're a political enemy of theirs, they're going to focus their time, resources, millions of dollars on going after that. It's a disgrace, it's a shame, and it's not American.
You know, Don, I'm glad you brought that up because this is really a stain on our country and an embarrassment like I've never seen. So you've got Cy Vance in New York, who's supposed to be cleaning up the city and enforcing the law. New York is the terrorist, it's the terrorist #1 target globally, right? We've got crime out of control in New York City. It's also the mecca, sadly, for financial crimes, given it's the financial epicenter. And what's their priority? The CFO of the Trump Org's free parking or something like that. I mean, this is total madness.
It's so this is what they promised you for 5 years, you know, and they're going to take down Trump. What did they get? They dressed up the indictment, obviously. They dress it up. They make it look really serious. They say he didn't pay taxes on $1.7 million worth of stuff over 16 years. So that's to New York State, 8% of that, $136,000. Half of that was because my father paid for his grandchildren's school in New York City. So you take that out. It amounts to about $5,000 a month. That's what they promised. They brought in outside prosecutors. They teamed up with the Attorney General of New York State to do this. So while crime is running rampant, while the numbers are skyrocketing, while people are fleeing New York, and while people are afraid to go into Times Square or Penn Station, this is what they're focused on. And after all of those things that they promised you, they do this. This is what they came up with to try to pressure someone to flip. The problem with flipping, Dan, as you know, there's nothing to flip on. You know, you can't flip someone when there's nothing to flip on. So what they'll do is they'll destroy someone's life. They tried pressuring his family. What are the odds that maybe Donald Trump just ran a really clean business? Maybe he built great buildings and operates great golf courses and builds them and hotels and all of that, because none of these things were ever thought of prior to this. So they try to attack a 75-year-old guy as a way to get to Donald Trump, and this is where they're focusing their money. So they spent millions of dollars. They reviewed 3 million documents. Okay, countless number of grand jury hours, countless number of witnesses. And they got a guy because he got a corporate car and didn't declare it on his tax return. Fringe benefits. It's never been prosecuted in the history of the IRS. A case on fringe benefits. 230 years of precedent. And our legal system used to be based on precedent, but apparently that's out the window as long as they're your political enemies. Dan, this is what Vladimir Putin does to the opposition party in Russia. This is what the mullahs do in Iran. But it's happening in America, and because the media is on that side, they're okay with letting it happen. They're not going to call it out, and it's a disgrace.
Yeah, no, well, I agree with you 100%. You know, this is third world republic, so-called justice here. Don, I got about 60 seconds left. But your father went down to the border, and he highlighted the fact that Joe Biden doesn't have a border policy anymore, said he would have been better off going to the beach. Now they want to defund some Democrats. ICE, they want to defund ICE, too. I mean, really, he was better off doing nothing, Biden, and just letting the Trump policy stick. We'd actually have an enforceable border now. Your thoughts?
Well, 100%. The reality is Donald Trump did more as an ex-president as it relates to looking at and addressing the problem on the border than Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have done. I mean, she goes to a border station miles away from the actual problem, does a photo op at the El Paso airport, and hopes that the media does their bidding for him as part of the marketing arm of the Democrat Party. We're used to this. Donald Trump actually went to the border. The actual border. So you can see where these problems are happening. That's leadership. He's leading from the front, and he's not even the president. This administration can't even lead from the front. They were only trolled into even going there in the first place by Donald Trump announcing a visit. It's a shame, and I hope one day we stop letting them get away with it, because it's an absolute embarrassment to our country. We're the laughing stock of the world right now.
No, I agree, Don. You're closer to the border than Kamala Harris was. But thanks a lot for joining us, Don. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Welcome back to Unfiltered. You know, the Democrats have a line. You ever heard this? Their line is, a program for the poor is a poor program. They have always wanted to get the middle class dependent on the government because that's where the money is and that's where the political power is. In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, "It's the Entitlement, Stupid," the editorial board writes this: Senator Bernie Sanders and the left understand that universal benefits are more politically durable. The only entitlements to be reformed in our lifetimes was aid to families with dependent children, also known as welfare, in 1996. But cash welfare was never a middle-class program, and the work requirement in that reform is nowhere in the Biden family plan. Joining me now is North Carolina Lieutenant Governor and one of my favorite guests, Mark Robinson. Welcome back to the show. We love you, Mark.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me here again.
So there's no one better to talk about this subject than you. You gave that nuclear viral speech I love. We played it on Unfiltered. You blew it up. The audience loved it. And one of the points you made in there is, listen, the world doesn't owe you squat. Get to work. You owe the world. The greatest generation has left you this wonderful country. You owe the world. We don't owe you anything. This entitlements program is devastating. It's going to destroy lives, Mark.
That's absolutely right. And the key word here is entitlement. You know, once upon a time in this country, when welfare was given out, people considered it a helping hand for a little while so they could do better. My mom is a great example of that. When my dad passed away when I was 12, my mom had a 5th grade education. She had a friend of hers who told her, you have 5 kids that are still in school. You can now just sit back and collect welfare checks. You don't have to do a thing. My mom did not do that. My mom got up. She got a job as a custodian at a university, and that's how she took care of us. And I had someone tell me she couldn't do that today. She could do it today because my mom had her priorities in order. When she got paid, she didn't get her hair done. She didn't get her nails done. She didn't buy a new dress. She paid the light. She paid the bills. She bought food. She took care of us. She did all that on a custodian salary, and it was made one of the biggest impacts on my life because I understood at that moment that working for a living is where it's at.
And Mark, now you're the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. Let me ask you a personal question. Does that ever sink into you? Like, my gosh, I'm the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, grew up in a poor family. My mom, really, I mean, you know, we know each other personally, but I've never asked you, when does that sink in? Like, my gosh, what my mom did for me. Look what I'm doing right now.
I had to catch myself last night, Dan. I was in the car with my wife and I was riding down the road and I started thinking about it. I said, my God, if I went back to when I was 5 or 6 years old, living in that little red ramshackle rat-infested house, if somebody had told that little dirty kid wearing rags that one day he was going to be lieutenant governor, I probably wouldn't believe it. But again, I grew up in a family where we believed we could do anything because we had a mother that told us just that. And she led by example. And the thing that we're talking about here today is right up her alley. It's not a time to sit back on your laurels and try to collect checks from the government. This is the greatest nation on earth, and dreams are still possible. Get out and make it happen.
And, sir, that's exactly what President Biden wants to do. He wants to expand this nest of government benefits to middle-class families that can earn, will earn, and should earn for themselves. And the reason is he wants to separate them from the dignity of work, something you've spoken about often. It is the dignity of work that gives us value. It's the dignity of work that allows us to impart our value on society. And I feel, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, that the expansion of these programs to the middle class is not just not compassionate, it's evil. You're robbing people of the dignity of a job and a life and prosperity. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that's what has made this nation great. What's made this nation great is not just our system of government. That is a huge part of it. But what's made our nation great is America's work ethic. Americans traditionally on the world stage, we work harder, more hours than any place on earth. And why? Because we have that drive. We have that desire to reach the American dream. And I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm saying this. The government cannot give you the American dream. What the government will give you is false hope and will give you a nightmare. The American dream only comes through hard work, steadfastness, and standing up and controlling your own destiny, not allowing the government to do that, but doing it yourself. And what the Biden administration and other leftist administrations before him have done or trying to do to our society is just what you said. It's absolutely wrong. In fact, in some ways, it's very evil.
Sir, just a quick comment, if you wouldn't mind. You know, we're turning into a snowflake society, and sadly, we're teaching kids to hate America. You know, we saw this at these Olympic trials with this hammer thrower turning her back on the flag and putting a T-shirt over her face. You know, your thoughts on that as someone who loves this country?
I don't even give her a second thought. You know, I had a Facebook post, had many shares. And after I posted that, I saw many others posting the same thing. I'm not giving her any energy or attention at all. I'm not paying her any attention. That's what she wants. She wants attention. She's not going to get it from me. The people that are going to get my attention are the two fabulous young ladies who came in first and second, who stood proudly with their hands over their heart, holding the American flag, proud to be Americans, proud to be representing Americans. That's who we need.
That's right. That's exactly what I said on my podcast. Celebrate those two. Celebrate the gold and the silver. Yeah, you got it. Sir, listen, thanks for joining us. You know I always appreciate your time. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate it.
You got it. Democrats are now trying to flip the script in their push to blame Republicans for defunding the police. That's insane. I take on a Democrat in the rebuttal coming up next. Welcome back to Unfiltered. Democrats pushed to defund the police for months. Now they're saying Republicans did it?
Not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
I am for defunding the police.
Why use the word defund? Why use the word defund? And it's like, this is the word that's coming from the street.
Defund the police does not mean abolish the police. It means a dramatic reduction in the number of police in our poor communities.
Joining me now for the rebuttal is Jammu Green, Fox News contributor. Jammu, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So, Jammu, if Republicans, as the Democrats are now stating, wanted to defund the police, then why did Republicans run against defunding the police?
Well, Republicans running against the phrase defund the police was their attempt to wield a narrative as a weapon. And quite frankly, Dan, what we're seeing is that whole strategy backfire on them, because for years, if not decades, Republicans have literally been the party of defund the police. They fought Obama. They did not support Democrats under Trump, and they fought President Biden on providing funds to state and local government for them to be able to replenish their public sector employees. Police officers are public sector employees, and Republicans have been defunding them for decades.
Okay, so I just want to rewind here. So you're suggesting, although the Republicans ran against defunding the police, they are defunding the police because of a bill they didn't support that mentions the police. How many times does it mention the police, Jammu? Just checking that bill.
Well, I can't give you an exact number how many times.
I can. It's zero. It's zero. No, it's zero.
Police.
No, I just gave you the number. It's zero.
And I mean,
yeah, but the bill doesn't mention the police at all.
Dan, you're a brilliant man. You've gone from being a law enforcement officer to a media mogul.
No.
You know that the only reason they ran on defunding the police was about a narrative and wielding it as a political weapon. But what really matters is how they vote. And so when Republicans go to vote in the House and in the Senate, they have turned to states, they have turned to local governments, and they have said, you have to go it alone. We are not going to provide these funds for you. So it's a little hypocritical, a lot hypocritical, actually.
I'm still confused. They ran against defunding the police, the Republicans. The bill doesn't actually mention the police ever, 0 times. But let me just run with your logic for a minute. The money is fungible logic. Do you support the affirmatively furthering fair housing agenda by Obama and Biden, where they're going to take money from the suburbs and municipalities if they don't put high-rise housing and low-income housing in the suburbs? Do you support that?
I certainly support dealing with.
You're defunding the police. Wait, hold on. Why are you defunding the police?
Affordability issue that cities are facing across this country and residents are facing in trying to find affordable housing. This is a problem that affects all of us. And who doesn't want everyone to have affordable housing? That seems like a very basic human right. And the more that we can do to get there, the better we will be as an entire country of a community.
Jammu, I'm a little confused. So you're saying Republicans want to defund the police because they don't like a bill that doesn't actually mention the police. Yet you just said to me you're supporting a bill that will literally rip funds away from municipalities and police departments because you don't like the makeup of their suburbs. But that's not defunding the police. You can't have it both ways. Is money fungible or not?
I'm not trying to have it both ways. I think it's pretty clear from the messaging, the talking points that Republicans are, the path that they are on, and their actual votes not aligning with that messaging, who is trying to have it both ways. You cannot say that you support the police, you support public sector employees, and then every time in your job, in the position you were elected for, every time you have a chance to vote to give states and local governments those funds, you vote against it. And to your point about affordable housing, I'm not familiar with the specific bill. I am in support of affordable housing.
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't be supportive of ripping money away from these municipalities, and the Democrats are, because that would be, by your logic, defunding the police. But, you know, whatever. We'll have to argue about that another day. Jammu, thanks a lot for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. You have a nice night.
You too. Hey, can Joe Biden deliver on his message to America if half the people can't even hear him? What is with the creepy whispering? Joe Concha joins me next to react to Joe's interesting messaging strategy. Don't miss it. Welcome back to Unfiltered. So I heard a little rumor, a little birdie told me there's a cinematic production coming out highlighting some of Joe Biden's most fantastic whispering moments. The trailer's just bonkers. Check this out. That looks spectacular. But in all seriousness, what's with the creepy whispering all the time? Check this out, this montage of Joe always whispering to people. It's just weird. Take a look.
Hey guys, I think it's time to give ordinary people a tax break.
They said when people are waiting for relief.
I got them $1.9 trillion relief so far. They're going to be getting checks in the mail that are consequential. I wrote the bill on the environment. Why would I not be for it? Pay them more. This is an employees bargaining chip now.
Joining me now is Joe Concha, a Fox News contributor. Joe, thanks for joining me on the show. Appreciate your time tonight.
Great to see you, sir. How are you?
I'd be doing a lot better if it wasn't for the creepy whispering all the time. Listen, I love it that the left goes nuts when we talk about this too, because it's funny, okay? It's just a funny topic. Everybody lighten up a little bit. But seriously, Joe, it's like, is this some kind of weird messaging strategy? Like, what's with the creepy Reverend Kane from Poltergeist 2 whispering all the time? It's just weird.
Oh, it's different, isn't it? And you know you're old when Poltergeist came out like 40 years ago, so just that as an aside. But it would be one thing, Dan, if this was if this was a Bidenism that was built into the dialect cake. In other words, if he had been doing this in public speaking for the last 50 years, it would just be a thing that he does, and we'd probably not be talking about it right now. But this whisper thing, which is awkward, creepy, and patently bizarre, is not something that he's been doing for years. This is a new thing. It would also be something if this was a way that other people spoke in terms of public speaking, but it's not. The only thing I could think of is my grandmother, God rest her soul, who used to gossip about people around town, but she didn't whisper the entire sentence, Dan. She only whispered the final word as the payoff, like, did you hear about the mayor's wife? Cancer. You know, and that would be it. But the president's handlers now, at this point, how they could not talk to him and say, this is something you don't want to do anymore because it's creeping people out. Why they're not stopping him, why he thinks this is a good idea, is one of life's great mysteries.
I think they did try to stop him and they got in his ear. You know what? This is my Dan Bongino show microphone. It doesn't actually work for the show. But he does this thing in one of the speeches, right? I don't know if you noticed this, Joe. He's the one where he whispers just a little bit, not a lot. He's approaching the mic. You can tell he's going to do the whisper, Joe. He's getting ready for the whisper. And I think in his head, he's like, my staffers told me this is a disaster. Don't do it. But now he realizes he's committed to the whisper. So he's up on the mic and he's like, I'll just do a half whisper instead. It's like someone said in his head, someone was in his ear like, please don't do the creepy whisper again.
Look, maybe this is why Mr. Biden's only held one formal press conference in the past 240 days since the election. Maybe that's a reason, because he has no ability to speak extemporaneously outside of public remarks. And this is the result that you get. And look, Dan, things are getting ugly for Democrats right now. And you've covered it nicely during this show, because 2022 in the midterms, when you have rising inflation and skyrocketing crime and a border that is anything but secure, the buck stops with the guy in the White House, and his schedule half the time, it ends before my kindergartner's does at 3 o'clock when he gets out of school. So now we have an absentee landlord that is running the greatest country in the world, or not running it for that matter, and it's going to get ugly for Democrats next year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe. That is a witch's brew for a politician. Inflation and rising crime and chaos in the streets, that has never worked for anyone. But I'm out of time, Joe. Thanks a lot for joining us. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Good. Classic Joe Concha. That
was good.
Thanks, Joe. All right. Hey, it's a scene that played out in the Ohio State Legislature.